Hello, my friends. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'm Flora, speaking out. I'm remembering this week, especially this week, of the first time I ever wore a mask. It was at a Halloween party. And in those days, it was mostly parties. 90 years ago, you didn't trick or treat except your very closest neighbors because it was a pretty destructive time. The day after Halloween, you'd be lucky if you didn't find your garbage spread all over your front lawn or your windows painted white or red or whatever. So it was parties. I think the mask I was wearing was one of those simple black things over the eyes, fastening around the ears. And not that was unusual, that's the most ordinary kind of fantasy mask. I remember the strange feeling of otherness, mystery, when I wore it. I could look out, nobody could look in. Now, masks are very featured this February. This past week was carnival time in the great cities, the beautiful fantasy masks worn by thousands in the streets. But also masks are very much in the news now for a grimmer reason, that Congress is in at least as of today, a total standoff about how ICE can be moderated, made more human. And one of the big issues is the Democrats insist that ICE no longer wear masks. Now, the Department of Homeland Security keeps saying, we mask our agents in order to protect their identity against retribution and vengeance, against all those violent criminals out there that ICE is supposed to be arresting. But why are masks needed really for ICE agents? Merely to protect identity? Prosecuting attorneys don't wear masks. Judges don't wear masks. Juries don't wear masks. Police don't wear masks. I'm wondering if it's a deeper reason. I'm wondering if someone there in the Homeland Security Department has been researching the history and psychology underlying the act of masking. Prehistoric times. And masking, whether in drama, religious rites, battle, combating evil or illness, masks serve two functions. Not to protect the identity, but to change the identity outwardly and inwardly. So whenever you put on a mask, whether it was cloth or wood or bone or ceramics or leather, feathers, paint, tattoos, whether it covered part of the face or the whole face, it was to change your identity. Outwardly, to inspire reverence, wonder, enchantment, or more darkly, fear, leading to worship, submission, obedience, the outer effect. But the inner effect was much more profound. Putting on the mask affects you with great, deep inner power transformation. Your personal identity is submerged into the purpose the spirit, the person you're representing. We temporarily become what we are representing. Not just representing it, becoming it. For example, masking in fantasy, like Halloween parties, carnival. The child becomes, for a brief enchanted moment, really the princess or the witch or the Spider-Man. The Harlequin mystery figure in carnivals becomes, for a while, in his or her heart, the mysterious shape changer. The actor, when he or she puts on the paint, they become the role. In religious rites in tribal communities, when the priest would put on the mask, he would feel himself or herself not just showing an outer changed face, but believing that he or she actually becomes a personification of the divine forces moving through him. And in battle, especially in battle, when you put on the war paint or the special feathers or the helmets through the dark and Middle Ages, and those helmets were terrifying if you've ever seen their pictures. It was not only to strike terror outside, but to feel one's inner self changing into a warlike force of enormous, overwhelming power. Now, obviously, this giving up of the personal identity has a sinister side. It's only too easy to forget who you really are, a human being, a faulty, limited human being. Worse than that, one begins to lose one's sense of personal responsibility, accountability, because you're the embodied purpose you're representing. You're no longer personally responsible for what you do. And for example, and of course they mask their whole bodies. The outward appearance was terrifying. The white pointed cap, the holes for eyes. They felt inwardly like the embodied spirit of white supremacy, and therefore losing their personal responsibility for the sake of this overwhelming drive and purpose. They are released to do what they choose to do because it is the divine purpose within them acting that way. So when the ICE agents mask, it is not just, as the government says, to protect them from retribution or revenge. They feel inwardly released any methods for the powerful purpose they represent. ICE agents are made to feel, I don't just act out the law, I am the law. Look at me. Look at my masked face, and you don't see a person. You don't see a person with changing expressions. What you see is an impersonal power overwhelming you. Fear me and obey. Of course, the federal government masks them also, does not hold them accountable. Even if they choose to beat a man senseless to the ground, even if they choose to kill, The federal government masks them, lies, defends, hides them, does not bring charges against them. The FBI, for example, is refusing to share the evidence it has with the law force in Minneapolis. So it's not only the faces masked, it is the actions masked. So much of our government, when it's not blatantly in your face, scorning you, preempting power over you, the rest of it is masked. Lies, denials, distraction. Well, the Lord Protector of England for 5 years after the English Civil War in the mid-1600s, paid by his friends to sit for his portrait. He would not have personally cared about that. The king, when they offered him the royal role, no, he remained a general and then the protector. For him, portrait painting probably was a time waste. And the story goes, and I love it, that he roared at the painter, "Paint me as I am, exactly as I am, warts and all." Warts and all. And the painter obeyed. In the fairy tales, they say when midnight strikes, everyone takes off their mask and sees one another no longer under fantasy, but as real human persons. And this, of course, is the only sane, healthy foundation for any human society, that we look at one another, faces uncovered, no longer veiled, no longer masked. We say to one another, yes, I have a function. I have a purpose to fulfill. I have things I must do. But not as an impersonal, embodied force. I am a human being like you, face to face, warts and all. Thank you for being with me today, and I'll see you next week.